Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the Post Advisory Committee. Calling the meeting to order. I would just like to remind everybody that there is a mask mandate in this county, but please feel free to lower your mask when you are speaking so you're understood by the rest of the audience as well as the court reporter. Please stand for the flag salute and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have not lost any officers since the last meeting, but please give a moment of silence for those that have been lost in the past. Thank you. You may be seated. May we have a roll call, please?
Banning.
Here.
Bernard.
Here.
Beauchamp.
Here.
DiBasilio.
Present.
Oborn. Here. Salazar.
Here.
Sandoval.
Here.
Schmidt. Spry.
Here.
Swift.
Here.
Viramontes.
Here.
Waltz.
Here.
Weber. Young. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Executive Director Manny Alvarez and Assistant Executive Director Scott Loggins. And where's Maria? Oh, there's Maria Sandoval. No, where's she? Okay. Sorry. This is a time for public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to comment on items on the agenda. The chair will manage the public comment period in deference to the committee's workload and meeting time constraints. Up to 15 minutes is allotted at the beginning of each meeting for public comments on items on the agenda. Based on recent events, more people than usual may want to address the committee. Therefore, if required, we'll go longer than 15 minutes, but may limit this period to no more than 1 hour, as we have many topics to cover on the agenda. Members of the public who wish to speak are asked to limit their remarks to no more than 5 minutes each. If we have many people who wish to speak on the same topic, I, as the chair, may intervene and will ask that you limit remarks to no more than 1 minute. Pursuant to existing commission policy, the chair may conclude the public comment period if multiple speakers are voicing repetitive or similar statements and the 15-minute public comment period has expired. Please remember that this meeting is being transcribed, so I may politely interrupt and ask you to repeat or speak slowly and clearly so your comment can be correctly captured in the transcript. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee during public comment? Okay, we will move to the next item on the agenda, the approval of the minutes. This is the approval of the action summary and minutes from our previous committee meeting, which was June 2nd, 2021.
Motion Bernard to approve.
Second, Salazar.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Are there any announcements? We'll now move to the next item, which is the review of the commission meeting agenda. Assistant Executive Director Loggins.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. A special welcome to our three newest members of the committee. Thank you for stepping up to the plate and volunteering your service to make the law enforcement profession all that much better. Tomorrow's agenda is numerically rather small, but substantively very big. We have one major agenda item. Your board has asked to have a presentation on SB2, which will be the first item we're going to address. So I will invite my counterpart, the Assistant Executive Director, Maria Sandoval, to step up and give an overview of POST's efforts towards the recent implementation of Senate Bill 2, which if you're not familiar with, is the move towards peace officer certification and licensing. And after that, I'm going to invite Staff Services Manager Melanie Singley to come up and discuss a proposal to make background investigator training mandated in several years forward. With that, Ms. Sandoval.
Thank you and good morning. I'm going to go over a general overview for the audience. And I apologize for some redundancy that you may have read already in the agenda item, but I think it's kind of important just to kind of lay a foundation before I turn it over. Senate Bill 2, authored by Bradford, was signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom on September 30th, 2021. The legislation was widely viewed as the state of California's single biggest police reform bill. This law will become effective on January 1st, 2023. SB2 primarily requires a Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, or POST, to establish the Peace Officer Standards Accountability Division within the Commission, to review serious misconduct investigations conducted by law enforcement agencies, conduct follow-up investigation if necessary, and make findings on matters that may lead to grounds for suspension or revocation of an individual peace officer certification. SB2 requires the creation of a 9-member Peace Officer Standards Accountability Advisory Board. Additionally, this bill requires California law enforcement agencies to provide POST with certain serious misconduct data from January 1st, 2020 forward. POST will also be required to issue a proof of eligibility certificate to individuals who qualify for peace officer status prior to appointment. The proof of eligibility certification will be subject to suspension and also revocation. To effectively execute the mandates in SB2, the transmission of data must be electronic. POST will require the development of an electronic platform to securely collect and transmit data between law enforcement agencies and POST. Additional staffing will be required to process, review, and investigate serious misconduct information. Serious misconduct information, which is contested by an individual subject to enforcement action, will be reviewed by the Standards Accountability Advisory Board, the POST Commission, and an administrative law judge in that order. As part of the preparation and implementation of SB2, POST staff has held one-on-one consultations with agencies responsible for peace officer certification programs in the following states: Arizona, Massachusetts, New York, Nevada, Oregon, Tennessee, Utah, and Washington. While many states have some form of certification, revocation, or licensing components, no other state entity has the robust requirements placed upon POST by SB2. It is important to note that California has the greatest number of peace officers in the nation. Approximately 90,000 peace officers will fall under the provisions in SB2. It should be noted that SB2 also requires non-POST participating entities, 52 within California, the same reporting demands for potential certification revocation. In anticipation of January 1st, 2023, commencement date of SB2, the following milestones have been created. As of November 1st, 2021, POST has redirected 5 full-time staff members to work solely on SB2 issues. Bureau Chief Jackie Nelson will be the designated project manager and working with 3 law enforcement consultants, 1 staff services manager, and 1 analyst. POST is looking into temporary options to increase the number of staffing to ensure successful implementation of this bill. POST will be holding a workshop in January 2022 to develop a pre-employment list as well as a decertification list. Those outcomes, along with a newly proposed regulation surrounding SB2 topics, will be presented to the full commission at a special commission meeting on April 27th and 28th, 2022. POST will attempt to have a process in place for the issuance of proof of eligibility certificates by July 1st, 2022. And although this is an extremely aggressive timeline, Post will attempt to have in place an electronic platform for the collection, transmission, and storage of data by January 1st, 2023. Finally, Post will implement the requirements of SB2 on January 1st, 2023. Again, that was just an overview of SB2 requirements and timelines, and I would like to turn it over to your Bureau Chief Jackie Nelson, the project manager, and then to Bureau Chief Colin O'Keefe, who will provide you an overview of the IT component. Jackie?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. As AED Sandoval just said, my name is Jackie Nelson, and I'm the Bureau Chief leading the SB2 transition team. As discussed, SB2 is expansive and it has many moving parts. The new law establishes a requirement that peace officers be certified by Post, and it also allows a mechanism to revoke or suspend that certification due to serious misconduct. I'm going to give you an overview of the scope of SB2 as it, excuse me, as it pertains to the responsibilities of Post. This process is going to be highly dependent on the acquisition of IT solutions, which Bureau Chief Colin O'Keefe will go into more detail with you after I complete my overview. And just since this is the first time that you will all be hearing about SB2 in this setting, we know there will be many questions pertaining to this, and we'll be happy to answer any of those as we go through this. So Tobias was kind enough to put up a visual for us up on the screen, and it's just a graphic for you to follow along as I go through Post's role. And I just think it's important to let you to put out there that the implementation of dates vary throughout the topic of this SB2. As I go through the presentation, I will try to identify those for you so that it's understandable. Primarily though, everything in this bill goes into effect to January 1 of 2022 unless specifically stated otherwise. So there is a lot of back and forth on dates that can be somewhat confusing as we go through this. So the first section we want to talk about is the PreHire. So in the simplest of terms that I can explain this is that SB2 has two components. There's a front half and there's a back half. SB2 really encompasses, excuse me, the life cycle of a police officer's career. It starts from the very beginning, which is the PreHire, and goes all the way through the final disposition of an employee's or peace officer's career. So starting with the PreHire effective January 1, 2022, SB2 provides new hiring and selection standards that will apply for all newly appointed officers, which I'll go into a little bit more detail here shortly. But it's also important to know that these standards also apply to anybody transferring to a new position that includes laterals, reserves, reappointments, out-of-state applicants, and requalifications. So everybody basically will be subject to SB2 and the PreHire determination. Tobias, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So now let's talk about the role of Post and how we review these hiring and selection standards. So it's been our role to ensure that agencies comply with these standards set by both the commission and legislation. This will not change moving forward with SB2. But as a result of SB2, there are additional disqualifiers for peace officer employment, which Post will need to confirm as part of the agency compliance. And these new disqualifiers go into effect this January. So within 1 month, all of the new hiring standards go into effect. Some of the disqualifiers include any person who has been discharged from the military for committing an offense, which would have been a felony if committed in the state of California. A person who has been convicted of a felony crime shall not regain eligibility for peace officer employment based on the court setting aside, vacating, withdrawing, expunging, or otherwise dismissing or reversing the conviction. So in short, if somebody pleads to a felony and they have it reduced as part of a negotiated sentence, they will be ineligible to be hired as a peace officer in the state of California. Any person who's been convicted of an administrative, military, or civil judicial process. Any person who has previously had their certification revoked by Post, has voluntarily surrendered their certification, or has been denied issuance of certification will no longer be eligible. Any person who is in the National Decertification Index for Misconduct will not be eligible for employment as a peace officer in the state of California. In addition to the disqualifiers, AB 89 added an additional hiring standard, which effective January 1 of 2022, a peace officer must be 21 years of age at the time of appointment. There is a little caveat for if you're currently in the academy that you are exempt from that, but otherwise everyone must be 21 years of age at time of appointment. Tobias, next slide, please. Thank you. So SB2 mandated post create a program to issue what is called through legislation, the proof of eligibility. You'll hear us refer to it as the POE as we go through this. And that POE has to be issued to all officers who do not already have a basic certificate at the time of appointment. So the intent of this is to ensure that all peace officers have some form of certification so that we can take action against that certification if necessary at any time. Beginning January 1st, 2022, the commission shall issue a POE to any peace officer who is not eligible for a basic certificate at that time. So what does this mean to post? We currently have 4,400 officers who are employed full-time who are not yet eligible for a basic certificate that we will have to go back and issue a proof of eligibility on starting January 1st, 2022. We also have approximately 2,000 reserves who are not eligible for a basic certificate, but now will be required to have a proof of eligibility that we will have to go back and issue those as well to those at that time. So we will have approximately 6,500 officers that we will have to issue a POE starting next month. And then starting in January 1 of 2023, that role will change where the responsibility then goes to the agency. The agency appointing the individual who does not already have a basic certificate shall make application for proof of eligibility within 10 days of appointment to us. Post will require that the agency submit an attestation stating that the appointee meets all the requirements under SB2. We're working toward a platform to electronically review background material before issuing the POE. Once Post confirms the appointees have met the minimum standards, we will issue a POE specific to that individual. And the POE will be specific to the agency and will not be transferable from one agency to another. So for example, if an officer who's not yet eligible for a POE leaves an agency to go to another agency, the new agency will also have to apply for a POE for that employee as well. So they are specific to the agency. Okay, next slide, please, Tobias. So now we're going to move into the second side of SB2. So we had the pre-hiring and now we're into the career of an officer. And in the event that an incident occurs or SB2 triggers, this is the area that we're going to go into next. So SB2 has authorized the revocation and suspension of peace officer certification. And there are two components. The person is or has become ineligible to hold office pursuant to government code, or if the person has engaged in misconduct while employed as a peace officer. So what exactly does misconduct mean? So by January 1, 2023, the commission shall adopt by regulation a definition of serious misconduct. So the definition shall serve as the criteria to be considered for ineligibility and shall include all of the following pursuant to SB2. And these are abbreviated. They're much longer in the bill, but dishonesty, abuse of power, physical abuse, sexual assault, demonstrating bias, egregious or repeated violations of law, participation in a law enforcement gang, failure to cooperate with an investigation into potential police misconduct, or failure to intercede pursuant to an unreasonable use of force. Next slide, please, Tobias. Thank you. So effective January 1 or no later than January 1, 2023, SB2 creates what we call the Standards Accountability Division, also known as SAD within Post. It's in the law, I promise. I didn't do it. The primary responsibility of this division shall be to review investigations conducted by law enforcement agencies and to conduct additional investigations as necessary into serious misconduct that may provide grounds for suspension or revocation of a peace officer's certification. The division will also present these findings and recommendations to both the board and the commission, and you'll hear about the board here in a minute. So I think it's important here to state that it needs to be made clear that the division only has authority to review and investigate allegations for purposes of decertification. That is the sole purpose of this division. So investigations can come to post from a variety of different avenues. First and foremost, post now will be must accept complaints from members of the public. So we'll be setting up a system to make that accessible. Agencies must report all allegations that could result in revocation or suspension to post within 10 days of receiving that allegation of misconduct. The board may request the division review and investigate a file or recommend that the commission direct the division to investigate a peace officer. The commission may direct the division to review and investigate a file or investigate a peace officer. The division may investigate without the request of the commission or board. And just as a first example off the top of my head would be if you see something in the media that was not reported to us, something of that nature. And so those are the primary ways in which post and this division can receive investigations in which we would do the investigation or complaints. Okay, so SB2 has many specific requirements for this portion of post's role. And just some of these requirements include that there's a notification criteria for both the subject officer, the employing agency, the district attorneys of record at various times throughout the investigation. We have a records retention requirement on all investigations of 30 years. That peace officers will have the ability to voluntarily surrender their certification, which cannot be reactivated at any given time. And then once the division moves forward with a recommendation to the board and commission for the suspension or revocation against somebody's certification, we must make notification to the affected employee, and they have 30 days to request a review. If they do not request a review, there is no further proceedings, and the certification shall be revoked or suspended at that time. By July 1st of 2023, this is kind of an interesting one for you guys. Any agency employing peace officers shall report to the commission any event that occurred between January 1, 2020 and January 1 of 2023, which become reportable pursuant to SB2. So basically what that means, there is a 3-year retro component for review and possible action against certifications. So we're going to be going back for 3 years on any of the disqualifiers and met through SB2. So the transition team is working diligently, might I add, on all these components. We're including case management, reporting systems, internal processes, policies, legal reviews, and many, many more aspects of implementing this portion of SB2. As you can imagine, it's a very daunting task for us, but I have a fantastic team and I appreciate their efforts. So moving forward, next slide, please. Thank you, Tobias. So effective January 1, 2023, the governor is establishing the Peace Officer Standards Accountability Advisory Board. This board will contain 9 members to be appointed as described by law. There's various ways that these members can be appointed. The board will be the first level of review, and their purpose shall be to make recommendations on the decertification to the commission. All members of the board shall complete a 40-hour decertification training course developed by Post. We are currently in the initial stages of developing that training as of today, and the board must meet no fewer than 4 times per year and must do so as a public meeting. Next slide, please, Tobias. Thank you, sir. So the commission is responsible for reviewing all recommendations made by the board. If the commission's decision to adopt the recommendation by the board, a 2/3 vote is required and shall be based on whether the board's conclusion that serious misconduct has been established and the level of proof is clear and convincing evidence. The commission shall return any determination requiring action be taken against an individual certification to the division, which shall initiate proceedings for a formal hearing before an administrative law judge. And that is the final requirement for review pursuant to SB2. So then that takes us to, thank you very much, Tobias, you were one step ahead of me. And then, so that takes us to the final disposition. At the end of anybody's career, SB2 now requires all agencies to submit an affidavit of separation describing the reason for separation and shall include whether the separation is part of a settlement of any criminal, civil, or administrative charge. This affidavit shall be signed under penalty of perjury, and that will be for any separation, regardless if it was a result of misconduct or not, if it be retirement, resignation, any other mechanism in which employment can be separated. And one thing that I just want to bring forward to you all is that because of all of the multiple moving parts in this, we are going to be very, very, very heavy in regulation rewrite. And we'll be bringing that back to the commission for support as we move through this process. So I will, at this time, I'd like to turn this over to Colin O'Keefe for the IT component of it, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions, which I'm sure you have many moving forward. So Colin.
Thank you. Good morning, Colin O'Keefe. I'm the Bureau Chief for Computer Services Bureau here at Post. And I'll just give you a brief overview on how we're planning on tackling Senate Bill 2 on the technical side. We have 5 slides here. I'll be quick. As an overview, as you just heard, every business process within SB2 is going to be backed up to some degree by an IT system. In discussing the bill's breadth and scope with the post SB2 work groups, it's apparent that there is no one system that is going to accommodate all of SB2's mandates. The implementation timeline is also short, with the majority of IT functionality needing to be online on January 1st, 2023. In addition to the typical hurdles of any project, which include gathering requirements, evaluating products, and programming systems using internal resources, there are budgetary and state control agency oversight factors that impact this project. Requested funding aligns with the budget cycle and will become available July 1st, 2022, leaving about 6 months to procure and implement any vendor-provided systems we need. Additional staff positions, both technical and law enforcement related, will also become available around that time. Posting, hiring, and onboarding new staff will cut into that 6-month period. Department of General Services, DGS, and California Department of Technology, CDT, have significant oversight functions in any IT procurement of this size, and oversight will generate additional tasks and analysis. Next slide, Tobias. Okay, so with that overview, I'll get into the strategy of how we're planning on tackling this at a high level. With those factors in mind, we're taking a 2-pronged approach on the IT side. We clearly need to run several development projects and outside procurement in parallel to meet SB2's aggressive timeline. The 2 approaches to this work are: number 1, leverage existing internal processes and systems, mainly EDI, that are already in operation, modifying and enhancing them where necessary to accommodate SB2's requirements. This will allow current Computer Services Bureau programming staff to tackle specific bill requirements that affect our already in place work groups and systems. And the second approach, simultaneously, is procure a vendor-provided case management system to handle the SB2 requirements, mandates for agency reporting and investigation of misconduct, as well as post-investigations and agency oversight that Jackie just summarized. And to explain those 2 approaches a little bit more, next slide. Going back to leveraging existing systems internally, specifically for the processes affected by appointments, terminations, and the proof of eligibility. The appointment process in EDI will be modified to comply with SB2's requirement for the attestations and the proof of eligibility. Attestations will be incorporated into the EDI appointment process for each new appointment to a law enforcement agency. Attestations will be reviewed by the post certificates unit internally. Staff will issue the mandated proof of eligibility to non-basic certificate holders. Upon proof of eligibility approval by the certificate staff, the appointment will be made active in EDI. Post-technical staff is also modifying the in-place certificate review and issuance programs to allow issuance, suspension, and revocation of the proof of eligibility and basic certificates. The notice of termination will be modified also to allow upload of a signed affidavit of separation, to collect and store additional reasons for termination, and to collect the individual's last contact information, such as email address and phone. As an aside, SB2 also requires us to post publicly or make available to the public certain information. It's detailed in the bill. Publication of reports and data sets mandated to be made public will most likely be accommodated on Post's existing open data website. And that website is currently in production and acts to allow searches on course materials. And that was put up several years ago in compliance with a previous Senate Bill 978. Next slide. Okay, so aside from the internal work that I just outlined, we are going to need some external technology to accommodate the new requirements of Senate Bill 2. So we're looking at new system acquisition in support of misconduct records and investigations. Law enforcement program staff and IT staff have evaluated a range of case management systems and internal affairs applications, as well as visited several out-of-state post agencies to see their processes. We are seeking a system that accommodates several processes, including agency reporting to post of allegations that could lead to a law enforcement officer's suspension or decertification. It will collect materials related to investigations or record disposition. It will accommodate internal routing to post staff for oversight, follow-up investigation. And finally, it will provide analytics tools so that we can generate reports that will be required to extract and publish reports necessary to the accountability board, commission, legal staff, and others. And in the longer term, we will accommodate integration of background checks. Last slide. So in summary, that's a high-level overview of the way we're trying to tackle this with technology. A very real concern for Post is the procurement process for the external system. The length of time to put this platform in place is very tight. We've been quoted by vendors approximately 1 year for implementation. We will be running up against deadlines for January 1st. SB2's mandates, as well as the required timelines, present significant challenges also for staffing, procurement, and internal modification of IT systems. However, once in place, we do believe that this technology approach puts us in a position to handle the anticipated increased communication oversight and data retention required by Senate Bill 2. And I think we can take any questions.
Thank you for that overview. I really appreciate that graphic at the beginning, Jackie, that really helped. I've been trying to follow this as it has progressed, and that graphic really made it understandable. Could staff send just maybe a PDF of the one slide to the advisory committee, probably as well as the commission? Because that, I think that really made it very clear visually.
So I guess this question is to anybody that can answer it. What mechanisms are the sheriffs and the chiefs of police going to be afforded, or what's the vehicle for them to be informed about all the requirements?
So that's a very good question. We have just this week started pushing out our first bulletin about how some of the hiring standards that will go into place effective January 1. we're going to have to do a significant amount of outreach. We've been discussing several different avenues of how are we going to do that outreach. I am only imagining as of this point that we will have to not only continue with the bulletin and past notices, but we will probably have to complete workshops up and down the state to educate our partner agencies as we move forward. And honestly, this is a very overarching, very encompassed requirement placed on both the agencies and on Post. So it's going to be a little fluid as we go. We're going to work through it. But yeah, we're going to have to do a lot of outreach, and we're still actually trying to identify that. And I see the AD or Director Alvarez has something he wants to add to that. No, Maria? Okay.
One thing that Director Alvarez has also been doing is every Cal Chiefs meeting, state sheriff's meeting, reminding them of what is coming down. We can't get into the specificity when it comes to this level. But the Senate bill's out there. It's going to be law. It's something that that agency heads need to be aware of. We can also send it out to our regional consultants who attend training managers meetings as well as chiefs meetings throughout the state. We will do as much as we can, but it's going to be a heavy burden for them to know exactly all the ramifications that are occurring.
Yeah, Member Banning, the hope is also in the fall of next year when we're kind of settling in and getting all this in place that we can go and travel across the state and put on presentations like this in much more detail for a region to get the message out. We've also talked about putting together informational videos, short informational videos on pieces of it, not on the whole thing, but little pieces of it as we go along. There is a lot of complexity to it. If you've looked at the bill, it's very lengthy. We read the bill, and every time we read it, we see it differently or we see something new. So we know it is confusing. There's a lot to it. We're pushing out a bulletin. It may go out today. It's already been signed off just on the new requirements for hiring, which are effective in a month. And we had a discussion yesterday. It's like, hey, is that bulletin enough? I mean, how do we keep messaging this? So it is a challenge to get the message out as we move along, as Jackie and Maria both said, with workshops, and hopefully, I'm hoping that we can do face-to-face presentations, I think is sometimes the most impactful.
Thank you. I've got one other question. The mandatory reporting of data to DOJ currently in existence in those 5 areas as far as use of force, IAs, all those types of things that are currently being reported to Department of Justice. Is there any mention in SB2 about the interaction between Department of Justice and what this legislation is really meant to be? Because that already is a train wreck at DOJ. I mean, I don't say that lightly, because people are just giving DOJ raw data, and then it's being interpreted by a number of different people, if I would, or agent, well, maybe components of DOJ, and giving people back, or an agency back, a story that might not really be reflective of what's occurring in their department. I think agencies are going to have to tell their own story, and this seems so restrictive. As not only the restrictions are so bad, especially with public sentiment about as far as being peace officers, I'm concerned just as a private citizen, when a major police department in the region has a job fair and 3 people show up. One of them's not going to make it just simply because they're not going to make it. They were walking by and saw the sign. And the other 2 may not make it because of, it's, well, I commend, actually, I have a lot of sympathy for you at this point, but good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to respond to that, there's no interface currently as a component within SB2 for the DOJ information to interface with SB2. The only requirement for the DOJ reporting is for the conviction data, felony conviction data, criminal conviction data.
And there is, there are, and I'm sorry, or Jackie, if I may jump in also, we have had some discussions with DOJ. They have some challenges themselves with providing us conviction information. Obviously, felony conviction information is easy to pass along, but there there are some elements of the bill that basically state if it was reduced to a misdemeanor and it could have been a felony, they have to report that. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to make those determinations to report that to us, including if there's a, some kind of basically if something's reduced, how are they supposed to know that? When they see the record come through. There are some duplications in terms of the reporting, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of officer-involved shootings or the discharging of a weapon, even though there's no allegation of a serious misconduct, or there's no serious misconduct allegation, it still needs to be reported to us, I believe. No, Jackie? Just straight to DOJ?
Correct, only if it's excessive, allegation of excessive use of force.
Okay, thank you for correct.
Okay, so departments are already reporting to DOJ. Do you foresee it? Well, I can't ask for a prediction, but if an agency reports to DOJ something and yet doesn't report it to this process through SB2, I mean, is there some remedy or repercussions, or is there anything written into that law that would prohibit some of that stuff now? I mean, I think DOJ is running into that now with even in Bureau investigations at Department of Justice is for these unarmed homicides, shootings involving agents, and then DOJ is going in and taking over the investigation statewide. They're running into some of that. I mean, some agency may not see that unarmed, quote unquote, homicide as reportable. And I guess it's an interpretation of each individual executive manager, the sheriff or the chief.
There's nothing that follows up on that with just as in DOJ. However, we plan on writing that into regulation, failure to report type of things and what will happen after that. But as of this point, there's nothing in legislation.
As a sheriff, I have a couple of questions for you. One, with the this occurring starting in January, what's that going to do to my hiring process, and how's it going to delay it? And when you have somebody who comes to you and they have a misdemeanor on their record and they had it expunged or reduced from a felony, how am I supposed to know that when we start this hiring process now? And suppose we get through this process and all of a sudden DOJ flinked up something that says, hey, they had a felony, it was a misdemeanor under SB2, you have to get rid of them. And now they've already been through the process and maybe even gone through the academy, because we know that government does not move quickly.
So those are the growing pains of SB2, right? That we're going to have to get through this transition period. So the best information I could provide you is the hiring standards have to be applied based on the date of appointment, right? So as a peace officer. So if you are appointed after January 1 of 2022, they have to meet these requirements. And so that's going to be pursuant to the background to be able to find out, if a person was committed a felony offense that was pled down to a misdemeanor, if that comes out, then unfortunately they would be ineligible for peace officer employment based on the requirements of SB2. So there is going to be a little bit of this transition during the people who are currently under the hiring phase until the point in time that they get appointed. So we're going to have to just work through those. I wish I could give you better advice on that, but that's the reality of it as it is. So
Backgrounds are going to be very important.
They are now.
Yeah, I know, but as far as the scrutiny goes, and like you just said, sometimes you don't catch those things, or a backgrounder may not catch those. And those are the types of things that we be following up on as well.
Well, that follows more back on the DOJ, because if they aren't reporting those and we don't find out about them, that puts us in a very precarious position where we've hired somebody and now all of a sudden it gets flagged. What do we do? And I gotta say, Post has been awesome. They just come and did their regular audit with us the other day, and the person that was out gave us a lot of information about this. And obviously I've been staying on top of it as the sheriff, but there's some concerns, and Bano had some concerns too that are very real. Thank you.
and as a follow-up to that, we are developing new background criteria and manuals and courses that should help answer some of these. So we are still in the process of getting those created. So hopefully that should help a little bit as well.
Good morning, Jason Salazar on behalf of California Police Chiefs. First off, excellent report, thank you. And Post has been given a monumental task, and we recognize that, and thank you for your work. I did have a couple questions that maybe you can help clarify. And as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of details to work out as we go through this. But you mentioned that the Post investigations are for purposes of decertification. But then you also, I mean, you have some pretty robust IT requirements here then for tracking, because so if you're able to also receive complaints from the public, those obviously, some could potentially be SB2 qualifiable and some not. So then those types of complaints, will those get vetted out or sent out to the agencies to handle from there, I'm assuming, and Post will not investigate those. But even if it is, if you do receive a complaint that falls under SB2, does the agency get notified to initiate their own investigation while Post conducts their own?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the intent of Post's role is to send all of the public complaints that we receive back to the investigation, or I'm sorry, back to the agency for investigation, unless there's a conflict of interest or some other unidentified reason. At this point, we don't intend to investigate all of those at a Post level. Everything we get will be notified to the agency that we've received it, and with some direction or request on how we ask the agency to move forward on it, unless there is some obviously significant conflict of interest. So,
Chief, the language in the bill is very, very specific. That the role of Post is to conduct reviews and investigations if necessary. So we see the primary investigative role being the law enforcement agency, not Post. So our goal is to disseminate that information that's received from the public when it's appropriate, which hopefully will be 90%, most of the time, will go straight to the agency. I believe there's also some notification requirements that we have to processes that we have to take when we do conduct an investigation to provide notification to the agency. Hey, we're going to take a look at this. So the goal is really to have you do the investigation, that we required to collect it and send it to you for whatever action you deem appropriate, and probably to keep us posted as to what the results are if it reaches that threshold.
Keep you posted, no pun intended. And I guess the next question to follow up on that is also you have parallel investigations. And so in addition, one of the major concerns from our association, and look forward to working with Post, is the further defining of serious misconduct. I think SB2 certainly outlines what categories it has to include, but there needs to be some more refining of some of those definitions. And so we look forward, hopefully, to working with you to come together as to what that definition will be. I think that has to happen by January 23. But the other piece, has there been discussion as to if an agency conducts an investigation and determines that there was not an SB2 or a decertifiable offense, but then a subsequent post investigation determines that there was, how does that get resolved? At the administrative law judge level through this process, or?
yes, so if a situation like that occurs where an agency does not feel that SB2 applies, but Post does, it will have to go through the entire process, since they are two totally separate arenas, I guess is the best way to say it, that it will have, there could be the opportunity that may happen. Hopefully, if we could get the definitions clear enough in regulation that everyone will be on the same page, but there is always that possibility.
And that's where I think it's pretty important to get that definition zeroed in. You mentioned that there was, so after a determination is made, the officer has 30 days to request a review. Is there a timeline then to when that review has to take place? So the request has to come within 30 days, correct? And then is there a timeline in which that review has to take place after that occurs?
Pursuant to SB2, there is not. We are looking at whether or not that needs to be placed into regulation or not. We're still evaluating that at this time.
And also, we've been talking to the administrative law judge and the individuals who are the overseers of that. And do we need to, we kind of gave them a heads up on, we may need to have you beef up administrative law judges, because at this point, they had no idea this was coming down in this magnitude. And we had a meeting with them yesterday, and I think they were a little bit surprised at how many we anticipate. They have 4 branches. They have one in San Diego, one in LA, one in the Bay Area, and one in Sacramento, that they currently run these reviews out of. So it's going to be, how are we going to be impactful to them? And it may be overwhelming for them as well. So that's why we're trying to get ahead of this at this level, or at this time period, is just say, hey, this is coming. And they were a little surprised about that.
Yeah, that could be a significant concern, because if they get backed up 2 years and we're waiting for a resolution and still don't have, what do we do with that officer if they're pending a decertification and no decision? So that would obviously be a concern as well.
The only timeframe listed within SB2 is that the investigation has to be completed within 3 years of the time we received it.
Generally speaking, there's a time constraint for the departments of 1 year, generally speaking, to conduct the investigation. Then we have that 3-year clock that Jackie just mentioned. There is a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a high wire act for post to make a determination whether to proceed with a revocation or not. It doesn't all automatically go to the advisory board. So there is some assessment or some judgment that needs to be made internally within post, whether to move it forward or not. And that obviously is concerning to us, because generally speaking, with the way we operate now, it's like it's in regulation, you either do it, it's black or white. So there is some decisions that need to be made. The second question, in terms of your in terms of the question about the 30 days, we're also having discussions about, well, how, when you notify that individual when you're ready, when you are ready to say, hey, we're proceeding with the revocation. How much, when do we do that? Obviously you have to have the justification, but at what point do you prepare all the documentation, everything that goes to the commission, which is a lot of work when you make that notification, or do you make the notification and then if the person appeals, put it together? But when that notification goes to that individual, it should be already decided internally at post, hey, we're moving forward.
One last comment question. So we just followed the finance committee, and you mentioned a 5% budget cut that particularly affected your administration, but it's not in this staff report, and I believe I've seen it somewhere before, but I don't recall. But what are the budgetary and staffing impacts on post with SB2? Tremendous.
They're significant, I guess is a good way to put it. We put together a number of different, proposals as to how this would operate. There are significant, constraints for us, or, significant resources that we're going to need, both from a budget standpoint and from a personnel standpoint, to do it right. It seems like in all our discussions inside the Capitol, everybody's in agreement. They see that this being a heavy lift. I hope that we're going to get there and get all the support that we think we need. I think we'll get it. The bigger issue that gives us pause right now is the timing of it, right? As Colin just mentioned, getting the application in place, getting the personnel hired to do it all. It's a very, very short window, but it will take significant resources, I guess is the best way we can answer that, Chief. Significant, we think. Yeah,
I agree. It's a heavy lift, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with you. But I know on behalf of most chiefs and sheriffs, we're struggling to hire and fill spots. And so this is you've got a big challenge, not just in terms financially, but just getting the staffing on board and that timeline to do what you're been tasked with. Thank you.
One more point I'd like to make, Chief, is I want this board and the commission to understand our role at post. We do not look at ourselves as being investigators. We do not want it to do investigations outside of you. If we look at a case that comes to us that may need some more investigation in a certain area, we want to send it back to you. We don't want to go out and do an investigation. We do not want to become an investigative body. That's not our role.
and then also to emphasize the serious misconduct that you addressed, Chief, we are, as Jackie mentioned, embarking on that process starting in January, and we know it's going to take a lot of people speaking to us and providing us reviews of information and potential definitions for serious misconduct that will have to go into regulation. we hope that we will have a number, some recommendations to the commission in April. That's kind of the big ticket item for us, or those definitions, that we present them with, hey, here's some possibilities of what you should consider. And hopefully they'll tell us what they feel serious recommendations should be.
Just one more question. I know the commissioners are going to have all the same questions we asked, probably a lot more. How are the review board? They're going to be appointees? And that
Correct.
appointment is made by,
By the governor.
wow.
And I'm sorry, I don't know if they've also thrown in some legislative appointments, but I think there's a couple in there. But they're 9 appointments generally made by the governor for, I believe, 3-year terms. The initial appointments are staggered. One will get a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year till, so they don't all leave at the same time.
Thank you.
I have a question. Ezra Beauchamp with CHP. I'm just wondering if the timeframes you've spoken about in investigations and Manny referenced the 1 year that agencies have to complete investigations. You have in 3304, I believe it is, in the government code, the 1 year timeframe. Are there any issues with the timeframes and how those investigations are completed, and then being able to take punitive action if not completed within the required timeframes as outlined? And do we run into any issues with that, where technically a government code could say you can't take action, but then Senate Bill 2 would say that you have to take action? Has that been discussed, or how that would get resolved?
So I think we're talking apples and oranges, if I understand your question correctly. And Manny, back me up on this if I'm wrong, but there are 2 different processes. So for example, for our purposes, POBAR or Peace Officer Bill of Rights won't apply to what we're doing because we're not the employing agency. So the timelines afforded to agencies based on that do not apply to what we're doing. So if I understand you correctly, I think we're talking 2 separate processes, if you will, and the times that would not intersect would be an issue.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Are there any more questions from the committee? Go ahead, Mr. Chair. Okay. Very well, then, thank you very much, Maria, Jackie, and Colin. And this leads back into the very next presentation, talking about the importance of thorough backgrounds. So to that extent, I'm going to invite Staff Services Manager Melanie Singley to the podium, and she's going to go over item H, which is a proposal to require background training for all background investigators.
Good morning. I'm John Loudon with the Strategic Communications Research Bureau. I'm the Bureau Chief, and I'm with Melanie Singley, Staff Services Manager. We're going to go over, or Melanie's going to discuss the mandatory training for background investigators. California Government Code 1031 requires that all peace officers receive and undergo a thorough background investigation prior to being hired. Commission Regulation 1953 also addresses the need that past behavior is reviewed in the performance of any peace officer. Melanie has, over the past year or so, done a lot of work in this with the background arena. She's conducted analysis. She's worked with our subject matter experts, psychologists, members in law enforcement, and background investigators. And with her research, her surveys, and her analysis, she's going to provide a brief discussion on some of the results and some of the options that we have come up with for mandatory training for us. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Thank you, John. So mandating background investigation training has been a post-strategic plan objective since roughly 2015. Although regulations and guidance developed and offered by Post provide extensive and comprehensive requirements and relevant tools and resources for conducting investigations, there is no current training requirement to ensure that background investigators have the knowledge and understanding to conduct thorough, efficient, and effective investigations. Acknowledging the importance in ensuring that background investigators are adequately trained, Post conducted a survey in October 2021 to identify who primarily conducts background investigations, if they're trained, and what types of training would be most efficient and effective for departments. Roughly 2/3 of the 96 respondents to that survey indicated that they use third-party investigators. So those are contract investigators for at least some of their background investigations, and 80% or 77 respondents require some form of training for their investigators currently. They also rely on third-party investigators to obtain the training on their own. Online training was identified as a good option for a majority of respondents, as it has the advantage of being available anytime and at no cost. The majority of the survey respondents indicate that investigators would be able to complete an online training within a short period of time, for example, like immediately or within 3 months. That said, many agree that in-person training is likely the most effective and would likely be feasible within a 12-month period. Of the small percentage who indicated that in-person training may not be feasible, they identified challenges with staffing issues, costs, and availability of training. Although the 2021 survey indicated that a majority of investigators had completed training, a 2019 survey of background investigators revealed that the quality and consistency of background investigation training varied depending upon the presenter. Respondents had expressed a desire for more scenarios, including candidate interviews, as well as information on social media and web-based searches. The results were mixed with regard to the length of the course, with some indicating that it was unnecessarily long, and others indicating that it was too short to cover the amount of information presented. Several pointed to the issue of instructors reading content from PowerPoints and the material being what they call too dry. Based on the results of the surveys, staff is proposing developing online training through the post-learning portal system. The training would serve as an initial course and or prerequisite to the longer in-person course. Utilizing online training would also give staff the option of developing more specific content-focused online courses to address emerging needs and or issues. The initial online training would consist of the less dynamic content of the current course, such as post regulations, relevant laws, and standard procedures. It would be available as indicated at any time at no cost, and would be required to be completed prior to conducting background investigations. We anticipate that this requirement would be followed by a mandate of an in-person course, which could be taken within a 12-month time period. With a prerequisite online training, the current 32-hour course could be modified and shortened to focus on the practical applications of conducting investigations using scenarios and more dynamic instruction and interaction. The reduced instruction time should then help mitigate some of the issues with staffing concerns and costs, and may provide for more frequent presentations. To ensure consistency across presenters, staff would also work on mandating specific content for in-person training. Understanding the importance of ensuring that background investigators are adequately trained, staff is proposing to mandate that post-certified background investigation training be required prior to conducting investigations with an effective date of July 1st, 2023. The lengthy transition period will allow departments and investigators ample time to plan for the training and will provide staff time to develop the online training, update the in-person courses, and identify mandated course curriculum. Does anyone have any questions?
No questions, just comment. I support this. I think it's a good idea. There may be some challenges for smaller agencies, but I think in light of what we just discussed with SB2 requirements, this is probably even more important in light of what's happening with SB2 and the need for background investigators to be well trained and understand what those requirements are to vet some of those issues out. So I'm supportive of it and think the longer version of the course is probably better to cover some of these new additions.
Thank you, Chief. We are mindful of the fact that it will have an economic impact on those investigators who are no longer peace officers. As you're well, the penal code prohibits us from reimbursing anybody who's not a member of a post-participating agency. So to mitigate those factors, as Melanie alluded to, our goal, we've built in a significant timeline, so this won't go into effect for a few years. The idea is, or her idea is, to create that assessment tool / online training that will be offered at no cost whatsoever to all investigators, at least so we can get a benchmark to guarantee that they have a modicum of knowledge as to how to do the background, and then follow up with a shortened version of the background course. Nevertheless, that will be an expense that will be incurred by people who are no longer peace officers, but as you alluded to, we certainly hope it's an investment in better backgrounds moving forward.
Question. Hi, Julie Spry, brand new.
Mhm.
What would be the extended time of that, let's say that training? How long will that last for that background investigator? Will there be a timeline for them to have to recertify or retrain on it?
That's something we can consider. So there is currently an initial course and an update course. So that's as we kind of develop this process, whether we're going to mandate updated training will be based upon kind of the training they're given and the time frame. I think with having an online component, that can be something that could easily be done through an online component. So maybe it's a 2-hour online course they do every couple of years or 3 or 4 years, depending upon changes in background. Obviously, we have a lot of changes coming forward now. So it just depends upon mandates that come down the line.
Yeah, the change and the amount of movement that we have throughout the state with our agencies will be, this will affect it as well, because people will continue to have to train consistently because of fluctuation.
Very well. If there's no more questions, thank you, John, and thank you, Melanie. Mr. Chair, that concludes our review of the commission agenda for this afternoon.
Okay. That brings us to the advisory committee member reports. Mr. Sandoval.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Nothing to report.
Something to report.
Oh, good.
Kathy Oborn with KG. So in compliance with SB 1440, the Administration of Justice Transfer Degree, which is what we teach in the community college that transfers to the California State University system, we're completing our 5-year curriculum review. And by 2022, the updated course descriptors will be vetted to all of the Administration of Justice educators throughout the state of California for review.
Thank you, Mr. Swift.
Nothing to report.
Ms. Spry.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Viramontes.
Nothing to report.
Chief Salazar.
Nothing. I think we covered it.
Sheriff DeVasilio.
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. Banning.
I'm good. Thank you. Nothing to report.
I know Ms. Weber is going to give us something.
Hi, thank you, Chair Waltz. Good afternoon, fellow commissioners. I'm here, I'm Shani Weber, Vice Chancellor of California Community College's Chancellor's Office. And I am here to provide you an update on AB 89, which impacts the California Community Colleges. So many of you are familiar with AB 89, which is the new bill that requires the Office of the Chancellor to develop a modern policing degree program in conjunction with POST, along with other key stakeholders. And these key stakeholders will serve as advisors and represent the field to include law enforcement employees and administration. The bill specifically calls out for Cal State faculty, administration, community organizers, and other relevant to the field along with community members. And so what I'd like to do is just to give you a quick update in terms of what our plans are coming up next year in how we plan to approach and work with POST on this particular bill. Right now, we're organizing the scope of work to really encompass 3 major pieces, because the bill also requires that we develop a final report for the legislature regarding the modern policing degree program, our recommendations for that, and also looking at working with our faculty on that. So the 3 major components of it includes, first of all, there are obviously a number of administrative implications for developing of the offering of modern policing degree program. It impacts posts, it impacts a lot of law enforcement agencies. And we need to get a better understanding of all of those administrative impacts as we're going through looking at developing this report and thinking about the modern policing degree program. And then the second part of it is really putting together this advisory group that includes all of those key holders. The bill specifically calls out for specific members to be part of this advisory group process, which will be working probably throughout the next year. We have about a year and a half, and this group will be working with a number of subject matter experts really to then develop recommendations that we can put into the final report to the legislature. So that's the second big group of work, body of work that we will be doing. And then the third piece that's related to this is really doing a landscape analysis of the basic police academies within our system. We have 19 out of the 41 post-certified police academies. And we are very interested in looking at the data related to our police academies, how the curriculum is being implemented and offered, because there are some implications to AB 89 and the designing of this modern policing degree. Primarily looking at how the basic police academy training requirements can be incorporated into the degree program so that it makes it efficient for any new recruits to get through the required education and training to not have to repeat things. The other piece we have to also investigate is the prior experience. Sometimes we get that from our recruits, and how do we in our system provide credit for prior learning for individuals to help them get through the degree program in a more accelerated manner. Another area is exploring the potential of developing a 4-year degree as well as a potential future step. And then finally, there are impacts of SB2 requirements on new recruits that we heard today that will also impact our selection and hiring of selection of recruits actually, and screening of recruits for the basic police academy program. So that's essentially sort of the body of work that we have ahead of us. The timeline we are looking in launching this sometime in January of next year, beginning to assemble the advisory group. Very much like some of the other legislation, AB 89 is not funded. And so part of it is also looking at what resources and how to organize resources and bandwidth for the Chancellor's Office to take this on and make sure that we have the report due to legislature by June of 2023. That concludes my report.
Thank you for that. Executive Director Alvarez has a comment.
I do have a comment. First of all, thank you very much, Ms. Weber. I just wanted to advise the committee and the chair that Post does enjoy a working relationship with our community college partners, particularly through the Public Safety Education Advisory Council, where we're a sitting member. And it's a collaborative effort between law enforcement, fire, and EMS. So we do have those built-in relationships. And thank you, Ms. O'Barn. They've been very helpful in providing us guidance as to how we're possibly going to move forward. This is prior to the implementation of AB 89, but I just want to reassure you, we do have a built-in infrastructure, so to speak, so that moving forward with AB 89, I think we already have those contacts in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, AB 89 was a big bill that was moving through last year that I'm sure you may have heard Megan, my colleague, speaking to it throughout the year. It's significant. It adds certain education requirements for the vast majority of peace officers. It carves out certain segment of peace officers, and it also has some carve out language for the commission to define what other experiences, whether it's military or experience or something else that should be considered. It's a heavy lift. We didn't know where it was going to land, and ultimately the onus was put on the community college chancellor's office to develop these education requirements. So we appreciate Vice Chancellor Weber and her staff and colleagues piecing that together. My understanding is the community college chancellor's office has 2 years to create this. And then after that, we have 2 years to implement their recommendations. So I know we will be participating, I presume, in some of those discussions as they develop the minimum education requirements or the training requirements, and then we have a couple of years to implement it. So I appreciate what you all have to do, and then obviously what we'll have to implement down the road, but thank you.
Okay, that comes to me. Randy Waltz, representing CAPTO, California Association of Police Training Officers. Before I give my report, I wanted to mention, as excited as I was when I got the email from Mr. Loggins asking me to be acting chair again. What's it been, about 12 years now? I don't know. The March meeting, I believe we have elections, nominations for chair and vice chair. So I'm looking at all of you.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank you, Sheriff Waltz, for stepping in and serving as the acting chair. The March commission will be the formalized vote to select a chair and a formalized chair and co-chair. The good news is, as the acting chair, you get paid double what you're getting now. So
Yes.
whatever double times 0 is.
And I'm spending
go ahead,
all of
send
it.
the bill. Send it to Maria. She'll be more than glad to pay that. In all seriousness, thank you very much. We had a change in the advisory committee, and as always, I always reach out to Sheriff Waltz because he was a prior chair of this committee, and every time I said, "Can you serve as the acting?" his answer is always an affirmative and yes.
So my report for CAPTO is that we've had a kind of a new breath of life brought into our organization. We have a retired member that is going to take his motorhome and be our ambassador and broaden our outreach. So we've had some meetings with more people. We're starting to try to get some more regions involved, some more interface with the LETMAs around the state. And we're going to continue to try to grow and have the networking that we can all benefit from. Moving on to commissioner comments. Are there any commissioners that would like to come up and make a comment? One at a time, please. And I see there's no old business. And we have an item for new business, which is Sheriff Rick DiBasilio, who is our representative from CSSA, California State Sheriff's Association, is up for reappointment. And the commission will be confirming that. Any other new business, Mr. Loggins?
No, Mr. Chair, that concludes the new business for this meeting. Thank you.
And our future meetings are projected to be March 2nd and 3rd, 2022 in San Diego, and May 25th and 26th, 2022 here at Post Headquarters in West Sacramento. Mr. Alvarez, do you have comment before we adjourn?
I don't have a comment about the future meetings, Mr. Chair, but thank you for allowing me to speak. Many of you were here for the Finance Committee meeting, and as you know, two of my colleagues run those committees or participate in those committees or interface with those committees. Maria, who you saw this morning, interfaces with the Finance Committee, and Scott interfaces with the Advisory Committee. Well, Scott is retiring, and I'm going to make a statement at the commission meeting as well, but Scott's retiring on December 23rd after 10 years at Post and I think 14 years at a county sheriff's department, according to your numbers, Scott. Actually, a few more years than that. But I just want to thank you, Scott, for all you've done for Post, and really, you've been in the executive office since 2017, shortly after I started. So I just want to thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for what you've done for the state in terms of your law enforcement, your peace officer career, and everything you've done for Post. Scott is I always call him the researcher, the librarian. Scott will find anything. It's like, hey, oh no, in 1978, let me find that. I think I have that somewhere. So we're going to miss that, Scott. Hopefully we can, you're on, call back that we can, ready reserve that we can call you if needed for some of this. But we want to thank you for everything you've done and wish you well in retirement. Thank you.
Scott has also been a great resource for me and answers calls and returns calls. Maybe he will be a retired annuitant down the road.
I'll say, first of all, thank you. I'm in good company. I never thought working for Post to be as rewarding as being a cop, but actually being the guardians of those who serve us, you folks, it's been extraordinarily rewarding. Thanks to Manny, my counterpart Maria, and the entire spectrum of Post personnel. A lot of people don't realize it, but the 130 plus people in this building are tremendously dedicated to making sure our peace officers across all four corners of the state go home safe. And also kudos to you, members of the committee. It's you folks and the commission that really are driving the force to make sure that California cops get the best possible training. So this was my 10-year plan. It has nothing to do with SB2. And there's a song. There was a song about a decade ago. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, and that's it. People have asked me what I'm going to do. I've been hit up numerous times about working, and for the time being, it sounds highfalutin and fancy, so I'll say I'll be on a sabbatical. I'll probably be doing a whole lot of nothing for a few months, other than hanging out with the grandkids, and I very likely will take some golf lessons so I can be terrible at golf less. But thank you. It's been an actual fabulous opportunity, and I thank all of you for allowing me to be part of this.
Thank you. Also, I wanted to formally welcome our new members on the advisory committee. Thank you for jumping in here.
Who are they?
Would you like to give a brief introduction? Take turns.
I'll tell you, I'm not shy. I'll start then. Julie Spry, I'm with Los Angeles School Police Department, and I'm a sergeant, been on for 18 years. And I want to thank everybody for this awesome opportunity and to represent our Southern California region as well and statewide. I look forward to working hard and bringing the best advice we can.
Lieutenant?
Eric Swift with the Napa Sheriff's Office. So I'm very happy to be here, very blessed to be selected to serve in this committee. Thank you.
Juan Veramontes, thank you for appointing me here. Been with the Sheriff's Department, Orange County Sheriff's Department for 26 years. I'm currently the president of the our association. We represent about 3,900 active and retired. And just thank you for the opportunity to be here.
And the only thing I would object to is the Dodgers mask. Is there any objection to adjourning? There's a gavel.